I'm a 30-year-old woman living in Texas, and I've met my fair share of creeps. But what happened to me yesterday takes the cake. I don't drive and I work in another city, so I have to commute to and from work, using mostly the bus and the same stops on a daily basis. I just started using public transportation last year, so I'm mostly pretty comfortable with it by now, which makes yesterday's experience all the more unnerving. I have gone to the store after work for some soda, so I had a reusable bag with 2 liters in one hand and my purse in the other. Approaching the bus stop, I saw a woman sitting inside. It's one of these shelter types, and while I'm normally very shy and won't sit down if someone is in there, I considered it because I was feeling fairly sick and my feet hurt after being on them all day. That idea quickly disappeared when I got closer and could hear her muttering to herself. I did a quick glance over as I walked past and could see that she had her bag spread out over that side of the bench and her shoes were off. So I concluded that she was probably homeless, and since her muttering to herself definitely put me on edge, I walked past the stop to maybe 2 yards away or so and set the reusable bag down. Uncomfortable, I pull out my phone and begin to text my best friend to tell her, and this is about when I start noticing what she's saying. Things like, "Don't call me sweetie, I'll freaking kill you." Okay, hackles raised even more, and I'm so curious to take a peek over, and I figure it's probably best not to risk antagonizing her at all, so I don't want to turn her attention to me. I keep messaging with my friend, and the lady is muttering the entire time. Things like, "Don't call me sweetie, don't call me honey, don't call me anything." She's also saying things that I can't quite catch, but one I did was, "I'll wrap my hands around your throat and kill you." At this point, I'm thinking maybe I should just nope it out of there. But the bus is set to arrive any minute, and even though the station is just down the street, I'm reluctant to try for it because I really just want to get home. It's stupid, I know, but she hadn't done anything to make me think that she'd even noticed that I had existed yet. Around this time, I hear her begin saying things about a fat ass. Now, this certainly alarms me, as I'm not a slim woman, and an S is a fairly gender-specific word. But what sends shivers down my spine is when I hear, "Your phone doesn't scare me." Clearly, she's speaking about to me now, as I've had my phone out since I got here. Just as I'm about to grab my bag, I look to the side, and she's now outside of the shelter staring at me with a look of intense hatred. There's still maybe 1 or 1.5 yards between us, but it's not enough to make me risk leaning over to pick up that bag and possibly give her an opening. She starts again with how I've got to stop calling her sweetie, but now I can hear the other stuff that I was missing before. Things about how she wasn't going to screw me, she wasn't going to worship me, I wasn't going to cost her her morals or her relationship with God, and just all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm looking anywhere at this woman, completely terrified as she keeps talking about attacking me and putting her hands around my neck. She sits back down, and I completely, idiotically, am frozen to the spot. And I feel like I don't even dare lean over even now that she's a safe distance away. Also, this is taking place next to a very busy road that directly connects to a highway, so I think it gave me a false sense of security. She keeps muttering. I slowly come to the conclusion that my bus isn't coming, and I'm now in tears. And then she gets up again. She's much more vehement now, and I'm completely terrified. The most scared I've been in my life. I see a man crossing the street, and as he steps onto the sidewalk, I take a deep breath and hope for the best. I lean over and grab my bag and nope the heck out of there, watching over my shoulder the entire way. I walk down to the next bus stop and immediately call the police to connect me to the right department. And I tell them what happened, although my physical description isn't very good since, as I told them, I hardly even glanced at her because I was really worried about antagonizing her. Not long after that, a family member happened by and gave me a ride, so I didn't have to bother with the bus at all. Also, my brother lives in an apartment complex just down the road from that stop, and he told me that she had been sleeping there for about a week, and he had had a minor encounter with her last night, so I guess they didn't find her. But she was gone this morning and still gone this afternoon, so maybe somebody else complained. I hope so, because not only do I fear for the safety of people who come into contact with her, I did legitimately fear for my safety throughout the encounter. But I feel really sorry for her, and I hope she can get the help that she needs as well. Back when I was attending university, I used to work on campus at one of the dining halls during the dinner or night shift. I lived in the next town over since it was cheaper to live in a crappy little apartment out of town than to live on campus in the dorms. But I didn't own a car, so I had to take the bus to commute. One night, I had just gotten off a shift at work. My feet were killing me and I was completely exhausted, and I slowly made my way to the bus stop. I noticed a man much older than me sitting on one of the two benches at the otherwise empty bus stop, but I didn't pay too much attention to him. I simply sat down on the second bench and listened to some music while waiting for the bus to arrive. The first sign that things were starting to get weird was when I kept noticing out of the corner of my eye that he was staring at me. At first, I thought I might be imagining it, so I looked over and caught him quickly turning his head to look away. Okay, so he was staring at me. This wasn't completely out of the ordinary since being a young college girl seemed to gain me a bit of attention from older men. So like usual, I just ignored him. That was a mistake. Again, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him look at me. But instead of just staring at me this time, he got up and walked over to sit next to me instead. I continued listening to my music, hoping that he would see my headphones in and take the hint that I wasn't interested in talking. But instead, the man literally took them out of my ear. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said as my head snapped to look at him in shock. I should have told him off for touching my things and demanded that he leave me alone, but I was sort of frozen, and I didn't want to make him mad. Hi," I replied quietly. He started introducing himself as Mike and telling me that he lived in the area, and that it was always nice to see pretty girls like me at the university bus stop. He explained that he was a real man, unlike the boys that I went to school with, and that I should go home with him that night. I was a shy, scared girl who had never had a man be as bold as this to my face. I say to my face because I had certainly got my fair share of unsolicited private pictures online by that point, but I digress. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. But that didn't stop Mike from continuing to explain to me all of the fun things he wanted to do with me at his place that night. At that point, I wished that I was anywhere else but that bus stop. But it was just the two of us in the dark alone, as I counted these seconds until the bus would arrive. And then Mike took things to a different level of shocking by telling me, "Listen, the demons want me to ask for your phone number, and they say that you should give it to me or you won't like what happens." He actually had the audacity to start stroking my hair. His hand was gentle, but I didn't want him touching me at all. And this was shocking for a number of reasons. The demons, I wouldn't like what would happen. Why was he touching me? What the heck was this guy talking about? As though he could read my mind, Mike went on to explain. "My therapist knows the demons are real. I told her about them and she says that I'm not crazy and that the demons are real." He laughed and then abruptly stopped. "Now give me your phone number like they said," he demanded. As his hand stroked my hair for the last time, he stopped and gripped the back of my neck, still gentle but even more terrifying. I was scared, and obviously didn't want him to have my phone number, but he was taking out his phone and I knew that he was going to call the number I gave him to make sure that I wasn't lying to him. And he still had his hand on the back of my neck, so I reluctantly gave him my real phone number. It's stupid, I know, but I was right, and he immediately called to check. All I could think about was just not making this guy angry long enough to get away from him, and then I would block his number. Thankfully, the bus came moments later. I sat down as close to the front of the bus near the bus driver as I possibly could, since the bus was basically empty. Mike decided to sit directly across from me. At this point, I tried listening to music again, hoping that being on the bus and him having my phone number would signal to him to end our conversation. However, he decided to reach over and unzip my sweatshirt, revealing my work shirt and the name tag, which I had unfortunately forgotten to remove in my haste to leave work that night. I hadn't told him my name yet. Abigail, what a beautiful name. Our daughter will be named Celeste. I shouldn't have been shocked at this point, but I was. I had stopped listening to music again and zipped my sweatshirt back up, which made him laugh. "You won't need that soon anyway," he said, and he winked at me, implying how he had planned to do what he wanted to do further that night. At one stop, Mike tried to convince me to get off the bus with him. I told him no, that I was tired and just wanted to go home, and so he said okay and he stayed on the bus. I knew that had to be a stop, so the fact that he was staying in the bus worried me. I was sure this meant that he was planning on coming home with me instead. "Baby," Mike whispered to me. I tried to ignore him, but he repeated himself louder. "Baby." He had the most unsettling smile on his face as I asked, "What?" He laughed and told me, "The demons say you smell nice." I was terrified and felt like I was going to throw up by the time my bus stop arrived. I lived in an apartment alone and I didn't want to know where I lived. Despite my body being exhausted and sore from work, adrenaline kicked in and I bolted off the bus and ran straight home. I made it inside and locked the door. I looked through the peephole and I didn't see him, so I went carefully to peek out of my window and saw him standing near the bus stop, looking around. He took out his phone and sure enough, I started getting a call from an unknown number since I hadn't saved his number. I ignored it. When he hung up, I started getting several texts, asking where I had gone, how he didn't like hide and seek, and how the demons just wanted to have fun. I was so scared because he knew which apartment building I lived in, where I worked and where I went to school, my phone number and my name. The only good thing which made me feel slightly relieved was that he didn't know which specific apartment number I lived in. And that's when he started yelling outside. There were no specific words said, just wordless yells of what I can only assume were frustration and anger. I blocked his number and I kept all the lights in my apartment off as I cried with my back to the front door. Maybe I should have called the police, but my brain was so frazzled that I didn't even think of that until the next day. And by then, all I knew about him was that he was a mentally unstable man, probably named Mike, who hadn't actually done any physical harm to me, so I didn't think that it was worth it. In hindsight, I know that I made a lot of stupid mistakes during this experience. I ended up moving away entirely at the end of that term of school for unrelated reasons, but until then, I switched to day shifts at work and was paranoid every night. Thankfully, I never saw the man again though. I'm not used to being alone, first things first. I have anxiety and struggle going places alone without friends or family. I live in Australia, so school started a few weeks ago. The way to school is one of the only things I can do by myself without freaking out. It's the same bus route every time with the same students that got on every time. I lived about an hour away from school, so I had to leave pretty early. It was 7:34 a.m. and the bus arrived. I sat in the back next to a girl with hair similar to mine, shoulder length and light dirt brown. We talked for about 20 minutes before she got off to go to her school, a different one from mine. I put my headphones in and listened to my music, had it blaring to distract myself from my growing anxiety. 12 minutes in, a man with greasy long brown hair sat across from me. He had a briefcase and was wearing a suit that hardly fit him. He looked professional yet messy. I paid no mind and continued listening to my music and scrolling through Reddit posts, Animal Crossing, Overwatch, and subreddits like that. Ones that take me into another world or a game away from reality. A bad idea in this situation. One song ended and I snapped back to reality for a few seconds. I looked up so that I didn't miss my spot, still about 45 minutes away. The man had moved spots and was now sitting 2 spots away from me, on the same row of the seats. I paid no attention. These seats were comfier. Heavy breathing could be heard from him, as I felt his glance on me and my school dress. A lump in my throat grew. Maybe an overreaction, but I'm terrified of being harassed or more. "Hey," he said after roughly 5 minutes of staring. My eyes slowly moved to him as he glared at me, flicking between my face and my dress. Now, I'm 15 and in 9th grade, but I don't know if I look my age. I definitely don't look younger than 14. Now looking at me with my mask pulled up more, he asked what school I was going to. I told him it wasn't any of his business and I asked him to leave me alone. He didn't like this. He asked how old I was and I said 18. I don't know why, I just didn't want to tell him my real age. He moved closer, slowly reaching for my bag that has my school logo on it. I grabbed it and pretended to use it as a pillow. He scoffed and picked up his briefcase, thinking that I wasn't watching. I had glasses, so the screen on my phone hid them a tiny bit. He opened it and took out something small and silver. Now guns are illegal in Australia, so my mind switched to a knife. And my suspicions were slowly confirmed. "Have you ever been hurt physically?" he asked. I nodded. I mean, who hasn't? Especially in Australia. "Bad?" he asked. "No, at least I can't remember." He laughed, forming a pit of fear and sadness in my stomach. I peered up and outside of the bus, still 20 minutes away. Students sat at the bottom of the bus. I didn't recognize anyone, but they could still serve as a way to away from being alone with this freaking creep. Yet I was too scared to move. I peered over at him and he was still staring, the small silver knife glistening in his suit pocket. "You're pretty." Screw off, I thought. You can't even see half my face. I felt his eyes on my chest. My chest was definitely developed for my age. I had a fast metabolism, so I was skinny and had hardly any strength. Not unusual for a girl who spends most of her free time writing and gaming, or sleeping. You could tell from my arms. Not ridiculously skinny, but not the opposite either. He was talking about random stuff, but I couldn't hear him over the sound of my heart beating in my ears. I took a deep breath and slowly came back to reality. "It's a shame you have school. I live near here." "Of course you do. I'm not a bad guy either." A stupid thing to say. He glared at me angrily like he could hear my thoughts. "Emily," I heard. My best friend Lily stood on these steps to the back of the bus. I could see a smile of worry on her face as she placed her water bottle back in her bag. She was little, but she didn't take any crap and she always had my back. She gestured to come sit down with her and some familiar students. I grabbed my bag, covering the school logo with my hand. Once we sat down, I saw the creep staring still. He stared at me the whole ride until we got off at a stop before school so he couldn't find out. The bus was pretty full at this point, so he struggled to follow me. Once the bus left, I collapsed on the bench and cried on Lily's shoulder, relieved. I told her everything on the way to school. I knew that he was going to try to hurt me, possibly kill me, and I'm so grateful for my best friend's great timing.